In a world of constant digital noise, a single metallic whisper can change the course of destiny in an instant. We explore the subtle power of influence and the hidden signals that drive the gears of our modern society. Click subscribe now and listen to what the future is saying.
She was already gone, and my daughter was still smiling at the empty chair. My name is Robert Callahan. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer building bridges across the Pacific Northwest, and I like to think I know how to read a structure, what holds, what bends, and what's about to give way. I thought I knew people the same way. I was wrong once, only once, but that once nearly cost my daughter everything. My daughter's name is Claire. She's 37, sharp as anyone I've ever met, teaches high school chemistry in Portland, and raises my granddaughter Lily on her own, with a kind of quiet strength that makes me proud every single time I see her. She deserved the world. She'd been through enough to have earned it twice over. Marcus entered her life 14 months before all of this happened. He came through a mutual friend, showed up at a barbecue I hosted for the 4th of July, and had the kind of handshake that men his age rarely have anymore, firm, direct, looked you in the eye. He was 41, said he worked in commercial real estate development out of Seattle, drove a clean gray Audi, and brought a very good bottle of wine. I noticed all of those things. I also noticed that when I asked him specific questions about his work project names, neighborhoods, developers he'd worked with, he had a way of answering that sounded complete but wasn't. He'd say things like, "We've done a lot along the waterfront corridor," and then pivot before I could follow up. I filed that away. I didn't say anything. It was a barbecue. Claire was laughing for the first time in a long time. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I told myself I was being a protective father, which I was, and that I needed to let my daughter live her life, which I also knew was true. So I watched. I stayed warm. I kept my questions polite. By November, they were serious. By February, he had a drawer at her apartment. By April, he had proposed at a restaurant in the Pearl District with a ring that Claire later told me cost more than 3 months of her salary. I smiled and hugged her and told her I was happy, because I wanted to be. And I almost let it all go. Then came the bridal shower. It was a Saturday afternoon in June, held at my sister Margaret's house in Lake Oswego. Margaret has a beautiful backyard, Japanese maples, the whole thing. About 20 women were there, Claire's friends, her colleagues, her aunt, a few of Marcus's family members, including his sister Diane. I was there because I'd helped set up the tables and because, honestly, I didn't want to leave. Call it instinct. Call it whatever you want. I was in the kitchen refilling the lemonade when Claire came in from the back porch. She had her phone in her hand and her face had shifted. Not panicked. Not crying. Just that particular stillness that a parent recognizes immediately as something being wrong. She handed me the phone without saying a word. There was a text on the screen. It was from a contact saved as D Real Estate Office. It had been sent to Claire by mistake. The message said, "Tell Marcus the Hendersons wired the deposit. We're on schedule. Also, has he told her about the Beaverton property yet? She needs to sign before the 30th, or we lose the window." I read it twice. Then I looked at my daughter. "Who is D?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I've never seen that contact before. I think it's his phone. He must have it synced to mine somehow. We share an iCloud account." She paused. "What deposit? What Beaverton property? He's never mentioned any Beaverton property to me." I handed her back the phone. I kept my voice even. "Don't say anything to him yet," I said. "Not today. Let me look into a few things first. Can you do that?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Dad, what do you think is happening?" "I don't know," I told her honestly. "Probably nothing, but let me check." I went home that evening, and I sat at my desk, and I started with what I knew. Marcus Allen Whitfield, commercial real estate, Seattle, 41 years old. I ran his name through every free public record search I could find. Oregon Business Registry, Washington State Business Registry, LinkedIn, Nothing came back that matched the scale of what he'd described over 14 months of dinners and conversations. No company listings. No LLC filings under his name. No project mentions in any commercial real estate trade coverage from the Seattle or Portland markets. A man who had described closing multi-million-dollar waterfront developments left no footprint anywhere that I could find. That could mean several things. It could mean he was a contractor working under larger firms and had no reason to appear in public filings. It could mean I was searching wrong. I didn't assume the worst yet, but it was enough to keep going. I called my old friend Paul Chen the next morning. Paul had worked in banking for 30 years before retiring, spent a decade doing commercial lending in the Pacific Northwest, and knew the real estate development community the way I knew bridge tolerances deeply and specifically. I didn't tell him everything. I just asked him casually if the name Marcus Whitfield meant anything to him in the Seattle development world. He was quiet for a moment. "Whitfield," he said. "No, not in any project I can place." "What firm is he with?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "Send me what you have," Paul said. "I'll ask around." He called me back in 2 days. "Nobody knows him, Robert," he said. "I checked with 4 people, 2 former colleagues, 1 active commercial broker, and a developer I know who's done every major waterfront project in Seattle in the last 15 years. Nothing. That name doesn't exist in that world." I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat very still. I thought about the text message. Has he told her about the Beaverton property yet? She needs to sign before the 30th. My daughter owned a condominium in Portland. She had bought it 8 years ago with a small inheritance from her mother's side and a down payment that I had helped with. It was worth, depending on the market, somewhere between $380,000 and $420,000. She also had a retirement account through her school district with roughly $190,000 in it. She was not wealthy by most standards. But for someone who knew how to structure a transaction, she was not without value. I pulled up Oregon property records. I searched Claire's address. Her name was the only one listed. Then I searched the name Marcus Whitfield in Beaverton property records. Nothing. I searched for any LLC connected to his name in the Tri-County area. Nothing again. But then I tried something different. I searched for Whitfield in property transaction records flagged for quitclaim deeds in Washington County, Beaverton's county from the past 2 years. One result. A parcel in Beaverton that had been transferred via quitclaim deed 18 months ago. The grantor was listed as a company called Meridian Path Holdings, LLC. I searched Meridian Path Holdings, registered in Nevada. The registered agent was a third-party service standard practice for hiding beneficial ownership. But in the Oregon filing, the managing member was listed as one name, Derek Allen Whitmore, not Whitfield. Whitmore. I wrote that name down. I searched Derek Allen Whitmore, Portland, Oregon, and what came back made me set down my coffee cup and not pick it up again for a long time. Derek Allen Whitmore, 43 years old, had been named as a defendant in a civil fraud case in Multnomah County in 2019. A woman named Patricia Osei had filed suit alleging that Whitmore had induced her to transfer title on an investment property she owned in Northeast Portland under the representation that it would be included in a development project that would yield significant returns. No development had occurred. The property had been flipped and sold within 6 months. The case had been settled out of court under a confidentiality agreement. I searched further. I found a second name connected to Derek Allen Whitmore through a dissolved LLC in Clark County, Washington. A woman listed as co-managing member. Her name was Sandra Whitmore, listed at the same address as Derek. A wife, or a partner. And the LLC's stated business purpose was listed as real estate acquisition and advisory services. I sat back in my chair. The question that was forming in my mind was not yet an accusation. It was a shape the way you can see a structural failure in a blueprint before anything has cracked. The shape said, "A man who does not exist in the world he claims to occupy, connected by a name variation to a man who has defrauded at least one woman of a property asset, operating with a female partner, approaching a single woman who owns a condominium and has a retirement account, asking her to sign documents related to a property before a deadline. I needed one more thing. I needed to know if Marcus Whitfield and Derek Allen Whitmore were the same person. I didn't have access to law enforcement databases. I wasn't a private investigator, but I had something almost as useful. I had 31 years of professional life in the Pacific Northwest, which means I had connections. I called a former colleague named Brenda Lester who had left engineering 15 years ago to become a paralegal and then a licensed private investigator. I had sent 2 referrals her way over the years. I explained the situation in broad terms. I sent her the photograph of Marcus that Claire had posted on social media 6 months earlier. I sent her the name Derek Allen Whitmore and the civil case number from Multnomah County. She called me back in 36 hours. Her voice was careful. "Robert," she said. "The man in that photograph is Derek Allen Whitmore." I matched it to his driver's license photo from the 2019 court filing. It's the same person. Different haircut. The name Marcus Allen Whitfield is not connected to any legal identity I can find in Oregon or Washington. It appears to be an alias. I thanked her. I asked her to send me everything in writing. She did. I printed it out. I put it in a folder. And then I made one more call to a family law attorney named James Okafor, who had handled my sister's estate several years back, and whom I trusted completely. "James," I said, hypothetically, if a woman becomes engaged and her fiancé persuades her to sign over an interest in her condominium as joint tenants before they're married, and then the marriage either doesn't happen or dissolves quickly, what is her exposure? He was quiet for a moment. "It depends on the exact documents," he said. "But in the worst case, if she's added him as a joint tenant with right of survivorship, and then there's a dispute, he could force a partition sale. She could lose the property entirely or be forced to buy him out. It would be messy and expensive regardless. What if there's also a retirement account? Beneficiary designations are separate," he said. "But if she named him even informally, even in a handwritten amendment, and something happened to her, it would go to him directly, bypassing probate. No contest." I said I understood. I thanked him, and I hung up. That night I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about Claire at the barbecue that July, laughing at something Marcus had said, the first real laughter I'd heard from her in what felt like years. I thought about Lily asking him to push her on the tire swing in my backyard and him doing it, patient and easy, for 20 minutes. I thought about how convincing grief and loneliness can make a person and how a skilled, practiced con artist would know exactly how to use those things like a key in a lock. I was angry. But anger wasn't useful to me. What was useful was clarity and timing, and not making a mistake that would cost my daughter not just money but the ability to trust anyone ever again. I called Claire on a Tuesday evening. I asked if I could come over. She said yes. When I got there, Lily was already in bed and Claire had made tea, and she looked at me the way she had in the kitchen at Margaret's house, that stillness, that waiting. I put the folder on the table between us. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "I want to show you something, and I want you to look at all of it before you say anything. Can you do that for me?" She nodded. She read for a long time. I watched her face move through things I recognized: confusion, doubt, resistance, the instinct to defend the person she loved, and then something harder and quieter settling in underneath all of it. When she got to Brenda's report with the photograph match, she set the papers down and put both hands flat on the table. "He's not Marcus," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "He did this to someone else. At least one other person that I can document," I said. "There may be more." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, very quietly, "He asked me last week if I'd be willing to add him to the deed before the wedding. He said it was about making sure we were building something together. He said the bank needed it for a joint investment property he was trying to close." She paused. "He gave me papers. I haven't signed them yet. I told him I wanted to read them first." I breathed very slowly. "Do you still have them?" She got up and came back with a manila envelope. I looked at the documents inside. They were a deed transfer quitclaim, just as I had suspected, and a beneficiary amendment form for her retirement account. Both had signature lines with her name already typed below them. I took the documents. I asked James Okafor the next day to hold them as evidence. Now comes the part that people always ask about. Why didn't I call the police? I want to be honest about this, because it's the question that deserves a real answer. I thought about it. I thought about it for 2 days after that conversation with Claire. But here is what I understood that a police call couldn't fix. My daughter was not yet ready. She had loved this man, or the person she believed him to be, for over a year. She had introduced him to Lily. She had planned a future around him. If I moved first, if I brought in law enforcement before she had fully processed what was true, there was a real chance she would doubt the evidence, defend him, and in defending him, lose everything, including her trust in me. What I needed was for Claire to be the one who acted. And she was. She called Marcus the following Thursday and told him she needed to meet. She asked me to be there, which I was, in the next room. She told him she'd found inconsistencies in his background. She didn't show him everything just enough. She told him she'd consulted a lawyer and that the property documents he had given her had been reviewed. What I heard from the other room was not rage or denial. It was a very particular kind of quiet. The quiet of a person recalculating. He said he could explain everything. She said she didn't want an explanation. She said she wanted him to leave and to not contact her or Lily again. He left. 2 days later, I forwarded the full package, Brenda's report, the civil case documentation, the documents he had given Claire, and a written statement from James Okafor to the Portland Police Bureau's Financial Crimes Division. I also sent copies to the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation. I heard several months later, through a contact in James's office, that an investigation had been opened. I can't say more than that. But the file is no longer just sitting somewhere. I also sent a careful, brief message through a mutual connection to Patricia Osei, the woman from the 2019 civil case. I didn't give her any details that might compromise anything legal. I only said that she might want to speak with a detective at the Portland PD Financial Crimes Unit if she had information about a man who operated under multiple names in real estate transactions. I don't know if she did. I hope she did. Claire was angry at me for about 3 weeks. Not furious, not cold, just distant. In a way I recognized as her needing to grieve something and not wanting to do it in front of me. I gave her space. I checked in but didn't push. I took Lily for ice cream on Saturdays, and we built a birdhouse in my garage, and I didn't bring up Marcus or Derek or any of it once. On a Sunday in early September, she came over for dinner, and after we'd eaten and Lily was watching something in the other room, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "I keep going over all of it. Every conversation. Every dinner. I keep trying to find the moment where I should have known." I looked at her. "You're a chemistry teacher," I said. "You know that the most dangerous compounds are the ones that look stable. They don't give off a signal. They're designed not to." She was quiet. Then she said, "I'm glad you checked." "I know," I said. "I'm glad you waited until I was ready." "I know that too," I said. "I know you." She reached across and put her hand over mine the way she used to do when she was small and wanted me to know something without having to say it out loud. We sat there for a while. The birdhouse is finished now. Lily painted it yellow with a red roof, which is not what I would have chosen. But it turns out she was right. It's the brightest thing in the yard. You can see it from the kitchen window when you're doing the dishes, and it catches the light in the late afternoon in a way that's hard to look away from. Some things you build to last. Some things you build to warn you when something is wrong. I've spent my whole life knowing the difference. I just didn't know for a while that the same thing applied to people. I don't know.